GSP is the GOAT of lay and pray, but if you watch MMA to be entertained, there's not many GSP matches you need to watch beyond the legacy-preserving gift decision over Johnny Hendricks. Cub Swanson never challenged for any title, but he was the highlight of most cards he appeared on. He's not as good a fighter as Justin Gaethje, and arguably less entertaining, but certainly one of the GOATs when it comes to match quality. In a year when one of the least interesting and entertaining fights of Gaethje's career, probably his dullest fight of the past decade next to the Khabib Nurmagomedov loss, is still being pimped as match of the year due to a meaningless last-second KO in a fight Max Holloway was about to win 49-46, Swanson has swooped in on the last UFC show of the year to deliver another 2024 fight that's more entertaining. Swanson has shown that one can be a main eventer by providing entertaining matches, and is arguably the most beloved UFC fighter who never received a title shot. Always near the top of the featherweight division in his heyday, but never quite at it, he defeated future champions Charles Oliveira and Dustin Poirier, but more often lost to fighters at the pinnacle of MMA, including champions Jens Pulver, Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar, and Max Holloway, and title contenders Chad Mendes, Ricardo Lamas, and Brian Ortega. For those more interested in seeing the best fight, rather than the absolute greatest fighter, Swanson easily ranks above all of these guys. Poirier and Edson Barboza hold the record for 10 Fight of the Nights in UFC, but Swanson tops the list at 12 when you add his 4 WEC Fight of the Nights. Swanson is 4-3 since tearing his ACL and meniscus when Jake Shields used knee reaping in what was supposed to be more of a fun exhibition on December 14, 2019 at the Quintet Ultra 4 Team Grappling Tournament. He's married with 3 children, runs a gym, and with Bloodline Combat Sports coaching, is instrumental in the careers of several fighters, including Danny Silva, Rafa Garcia, and Dan Argueta. At 41 years old, Swanson's been thinking about his exit strategy. At the same time, since he has other things going on in his life, there's less pressure to perform, and he can have even more fun with his MMA. Billy Quarantillo may not have experienced the same success as Swanson, but he's another fighter that's never had a boring fight, and always gives his heart and soul. He's 5 years younger, and used to watch Cub in the WEC before he even turned pro, but he's also a father and a gym owner who doesn't know how many fights he has left. This fight is a dream come true for Quarantillo, not only for the opponent, who was guaranteed to match his desire for action, but because this fight on December 14, 2024 was almost literally in Billy's backyard. When Quarantillo moved from Buffalo to Tampa in 2010 as a 1-on-1 amateur to chase his dream of being a UFC fighter, his apartment was just 2 blocks away from the Amalie Arena. In a recent interview, Billy said, "I would literally run by the arena at nighttime while working these shitty jobs, and I was like, one day I'm gonna fight there. I would go to the Lightning games, and I'd watch them play the Buffalo Sabres, and it's one of those things that I would always envision. And sure enough, here we are. It's a surreal experience." A hard-working Mickey Ward type of blue-collar fighter, Billy is the most entertaining sort of grinding war of attrition stylist. Quarantillo is an opponent who makes for an exciting fight with anyone because he's willing to come forward throwing endlessly and stand in front of them taking their best shots then firing back. An all-action busy striker with wild technique that boasts the highest significant strikes landed per minute in UFC featherweight history at 7.47, Quarantillo employs non-stop pressure and is perpetually attacking. He nonetheless lacks the physical attributes to overwhelm his opponent, and his strategy is always to wear the opponent out then take over in the second half, relying on being better conditioned, tougher, and more durable. Even when things go right, the opponent is liable to punch themselves out on Billy's chin, as Billy's exchanging style also results in him having one of the worst rates of significant strikes absorbed per minute at 5.83. Each fight is thus a tougher go for Quarantillo, whose hope is essentially to have enough quantity to match Swanson's quality. Swanson is one of the true savants of modern-day fighting, and that's one of the reasons his fights are always so entertaining. In an era where most MMA fighters fit right into the cookie cutter, Swanson has one of the few distinctive styles, relying on the deception of his aggressive and diverse hands-low boxing style. He doesn't evade as many shots as he used to, but in a division where speed is king, he was still a lot faster and more fluid and flowing than his junior fighter. Granted, Cub was a top-tier fighter, while Quarantillo was only a main carder against a name opponent. That being said, when the door is closed on being world champion, getting value out of the older fighters by putting them in with guys they can still compete with and have an entertaining match with is called good matchmaking. It's the reason a guy like Jim Miller is still useful to the UFC rather than an asset to a smaller promotion. Cub got off to a great start in this fight, When Swanson was fresh, Quarantillo just didn't have the speed or disguise to match him. He closed the distance so much better than Billy. Swanson used very purposeful feigning and misdirection to disguise what he was eventually going to throw. He was very difficult to read because he has so many options with his loose hands at the hip style. Of course, it helps that Quarantillo never saw an opponent's right hand that he didn't want to eat. Cub would dip low then usually throw the overhand, since Billy never stopped it. He was landing the lead left at will, and really doing damage following with the right. Billy had a hard time reaching Swanson, even with the front kick that he used repeatedly. He tried to be the aggressor, but Swanson would see the charge or the strike coming and easily hop backwards out of harm's way. Quarantillo could land the low kick, or sometimes the second shot if he was able to follow up the first miss. Quarantillo was able to counter pretty effectively, especially on the inside before Swanson was able to re-establish distance. Quarantillo really wasn't seeing the overhand right coming though, and that made for a pretty difficult go. The striking numbers were nonetheless fairly close, even though Quarantillo never seemed to land cleanly or with full power. Even when the announcers thought he wobbled Swanson at the end of the round, the strike appeared to only graze Cub under the ear, and be more of a case of Swanson losing his balance in order to mostly avoid it. One could definitely sum up round 1 by saying that Swanson did a much better job of landing big, while Quarantillo did a better job of touching. Quarantillo's corner was surprisingly looking for more teeps, seemingly playing into an overall strategy of keeping Swanson backing up to negate some of his power and aggression. Swanson definitely gains power by stepping into the shots, so there's some logic to keeping him on his back foot for sure. The problem is he's smart enough to just evade and then step back in anyway. His long stepping left straight really set the table well. Cub did a great job of following the jab with the overhand right, or just leading with the overhand right when Quarantillo was standing in front of him. Quarantillo was definitely doing his best work when Swanson was close to him, because he could land his short hooks. He hurt Swanson with a big knee 2 minutes into the second. The problem was that Swanson had more firepower, so even though he wasn't evading as much on the inside, if it was strike for strike, he was going to win most of the battles. On the other hand, since Quarantillo wasn't nearly as technical, he kind of had to make it something of a brawl. When they were both just winging shots on the inside, it was more difficult for Cub to really set things up the way he wanted to, or generate as much consistent power as he could stepping in. Swanson was really landing a high percentage, 62% for the fight, but by throwing 79 more strikes, Quarantillo was able to connect almost as often. Quarantillo was able to wrestle more in the second round, and even though he wasn't fully able to control Swanson on the ground, he made him work to get back up and landed some knees while holding him against the cage. Swanson arguably hurt Quarantillo with a series of punches in the final minute of round 2, but Quarantillo came back with a big knee. Each round was basically even in significant strikes, but Quarantillo had a big advantage in control in the second. If we're basically just considering damage like we're supposed to, the round probably still goes to Swanson. Either way, this was another really high action round. Quarantillo, who came in as a -155 favorite, was up to a -345 favorite at the start of the third round, so the odds makers clearly thought he won the second, and things were trending in his direction. His history of coming on after the first round due to fatiguing the opponent was surely considered. Cub may slow down in rounds more than he used to, but still gets multiple wins that other older fighters don't. In the end, that right hand that Quarantillo wasn't seeing all fight was his downfall. Cub used the left hand to set it up, and finally caught Quarantillo clean across the chin with a shot that he wasn't defending against. No need to follow up, as Quarantillo's head bounced off the canvas at 136 of round 3. Swanson's 20 wins now tie him with Max Holloway for the most ever in UFC and WEC featherweight history. His 9 finishes put him in third behind Aldo and Holloway, who have 11. Quarantillo almost predicted his own downfall in the lead-up, saying, "He probably knows he only has 1 or 2 fights left, so he's going to give it everything he has, and I think every fighter wants to end their career with that storybook win, that highlight reel finish." Though Swanson was expected to announce his retirement, in the post-match interview, he said, "I kinda told my wife that this would be the last one, but ultimately, Swanson didn't throw down his gloves." I always wanted to see Cub face Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, as they are 2 of the most inventive and creative fighters around. With Caceres being 36 years old and on a 2-fight losing streak, though the Sean Woodson decision should have gone to him, it seems a reasonable fight for both. That's more of a winnable fight that hardcore fans would really enjoy, if Swanson just wants to stay around, than something with broad mainstream appeal he can cash in on. The long-awaited rematch of his Hall of Fame fight against Doo Ho Choi, billed as Swanson's retirement match on a pay-per-view, is a match that would be a good payday, as well as potentially a memorable fight. It's the last chance at the rematch we never got because Choi stepped away from fighting, and it's never going to look more enticing than right now with both fighters in good form. While Choi is 8 years younger than Cub, he's a fighter Cub has beaten before, who has done less than Swanson since their meeting. At the same time, he's gotten his career back on track enough in the past year, finishing Bill Algeo and Nate Landwehr after a majority draw against Kyle Nelson that everyone knows he won. One can debate the merits of Choi getting docked a point by Chris Taioni for a grazing headbutt, but it wouldn't have mattered if the judging in that fight wasn't so atrocious that only the blindness of the blind mice, Adelaide Bird, knew to give Choi all 3 rounds. Cub's KO finish of Billy Quarantillo in an excellent match that once again won Fight of the Night is perhaps as good of a send-off as he could possibly hope for. Swanson had been waiting for his 30th win, and to go out on a high note. If he's done, it's a storybook ending to a career smart fans will relive for years to come. I think he's got another win in him though, and since he doesn't specifically need the fight, he has the leverage. Cub isn't one of the many MMA fighters that obviously needs to retire, but since he has other options, it wouldn't be the worst idea. I don't think we've seen Swanson's swan song, but if we have, it would have to rank among the most fitting fights to go out on.